let's
I,
just say I've done it enough to know how to not piss anybody off. So that,
that's the
if you want
secret.
to, if anybody wants to bring me on tour, I will happily be a chill, agreeable presence, and I'll show you where there's good food.
Welcome to the Marinade, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. Each episode, we welcome musicians, actors, comedians, authors, visual artists, filmmakers, anyone who creates art to talk about how and why we make stuff. This is episode 173, and our guest is Rich Ruth. Rich Ruth is a multi-instrumentalist and composer whose music blends elements of doom, stoner, drone rock, and spiritual jazz, and all the things. He's toured with S.G. Goodman and Circles Around the Sun and played with a murderer's row of incredible collaborators. But it's his latest record, Water Still Flows, that has a stranglehold on my attention lately, y'all. I understandably get pigeonholed as an Americana fan, but I love stoner rock and jazz and so many different genres. Every so often a record like this comes along and totally blows my mind. I am so grateful that Rich Ruth agreed to sit down for an episode of The Marinade. Everyone, it is my honor to bring you my conversation with Rich Ruth. Dude, I'm so excited to talk to you. I have been just devouring Water Still Flows, and then going back and listening to the rest of your records as well, and it just gives and gives and gives. And I want to dive into that and talk about the record and how it came together.
Yeah, definitely.
But but I also there's so much more to you that I'm fascinated about than just this record. And so I'm curious if we can just start sort of like with your upbringing and like
Yeah.
what it was like and what music was like as you were growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a pretty rural setting in Northwest Ohio, a little town called Archbold, like 45 minutes from Toledo. Kind of a Mennonite community. I was raised in the Mennonite church, and yeah, I don't know. My parents have always had a pretty deep appreciation for music, and have always been around music. Um, my mom's always been sang in choirs and has always been really into, yeah, like group singing, choral contexts. And my dad has always kind of been a stereo nerd, and
Mhm.
yeah, just always had a pretty obsessive hi-fi system and was kind of playing CDs in the house sort of my entire life, and still is. Yeah, and then I started, you know, took piano lessons and started playing guitar when I was 12 or 13, and then just kind of, you know, I'd say dove into the kind of normal trajectory of classic rock and grunge and heavy metal and things like that. And then, yeah, and then it just kind of expanded as I got older.
Do you remember that moment, like when you're 12 or 13, you start playing piano and guitar? Was it something that you took to immediately?
Not piano. I kind of it was just like my mom forcing it on me,
Yeah.
and it was fine. I didn't like hate it. I didn't care at all. And then yeah, guitar was pretty immediate. It was like as soon as I, figured out I could like learn how to play Metallica songs and Nirvana songs and things like that, it was over pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. All right. So, how do you end up in Nashville? Like, what is that sort of that transition?
Yeah, so I mean, this was probably I moved here in 2011, and
Mm.
I had just graduated college that year and moved down here with my old band at the time. It was called Kansas Bible Company, and there was like 11 of us that all moved down here in a big house together. And most of us were kind of raised in like a kind of a smaller town, Midwest setting. So I think we all were really into music. And so we just wanted to go somewhere that it felt like we could kind of take it seriously and be around a musical world that felt, bigger than us. And, we didn't know that much about Nashville at the time and we didn't really know many people here at all. It just kind of was close enough to home that it didn't feel, it wasn't like moving to California or something. Um, I don't know. I think a lot of Midwestern people end up here because it feels like it's like a nice balance of like, it's still kind of homey and like you can live in a pretty quiet neighborhood and have a backyard and a fence
Mm.
and stuff. But it's also like a, thriving, decent sized city where a lot's happening. But yeah, I mean, we didn't know anything about it. And I had no clue that I'd be here 13 years later. It feels kind of insane. Um, but yeah, we kind of lucked out. It was a very like fertile time for Nashville. It was really affordable. There was a crazy broad music scene. Third Band had just got here. There was tons of good rooms, and yeah, like you said, you could rent a house in East Nashville for next to nothing and rehearse your band there. And it feels like a completely different city now, but
Well,
yeah.
it's crazy. I was just talking on my other podcast, Life's Greatest Hits. I was talking about that period of time around 2012, 2013. So
Hmm.
you get there 2011, that sort of like
Yeah.
3 or 4 year period where like Sturgill's two records come out back to back.
Hmm.
Jason Isbell Southeastern comes out. There's just a bunch of music, and not just Nashville music. There's also
Yeah.
like Kendrick Lamar, and there's like all kinds of really cool
Yeah.
stuff. That period,
Yeah.
I
Like,
romanticize that period.
yeah, looking back, it's funny now that there is some space between now and then, but there's a lot of fertile stuff from that time, and I think will continue to age really well and is pretty timeless. Yeah.
All right, I got to ask you about one of my favorite songwriters anywhere, favorite performers anywhere, who I saw at Bonnaroo recently, S.G. Goodman. First of
Yeah.
all, were you in the band at Bonnaroo? Were
I
you
was
on?
not. I
Or,
was in the crowd though. I was
oh, you were?
harassing,
Oh,
making sure they were
awesome.
playing my parts all right.
She's one of my favorites right now. I like probably her biggest fan, and I'm curious how you got hooked up with SG Goodman, and then also like what that has given to you that process of collaborating and touring with her.
Yeah. Yeah. I love SG dearly. We have the same manager and close friend. Um, he's our friend Jay. Yeah, he's sort of shepherding us both through this chaotic world of the music industry and I think, started working with both of us before, anything had happened with either of our careers at all. So shout out Jay. But yeah, so this was kind of coming out of the pandemic, and her and her band were, well, she had put out her first record in like May of 2020. So it kind of
Mm,
fell flat in terms of being unable to promote it and tour, as happened to a lot of people. But yeah, so they were getting back out there, getting after it in 2021, which, was still a pretty strange time to be on the road for, so they were out for weeks and weeks opening for Madison Cunningham and stuff, and then things just kind of shifted with her personnel, and uh she was left needing a guitar player, and yeah, so Jay reached out to me and asked if I would want to do it, and I was just working. I was working on music a ton. I was like writing my second record, but I was
mm.
just working in a restaurant full time, and it sucked. So during the pandemic, which is like all, not a good time to be working in a restaurant either. So
Yeah.
when the opportunity came along, I was like, yes, please. I was like, literally, I was going to my like my work Halloween party. I was dressed like a safari guy, and she called me. She was like, are you available to like do this run?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm so available right now. I'm wearing a safari hat, buying a 6 pack of Coors Light, about to play kickball." So yeah, uh,
That sounds like the best party ever.
and actually, yeah, no, those parties were pretty cool. but yeah, so then I was just basically just in her touring band for 2 years straight, and yeah, I mean her schedule was crazy during
Mm.
that time, and but it was great. We got to do so much cool stuff. We got to play at Red Rocks and tour with Jason Isbell, Tyler Childers, and go from you know just in the 2 years I was playing with her, go from essentially nobody knowing who she is to being able to sell out decent sized club shows and play big festivals and stuff. And yeah, so it was a great time, and I'm really thankful for it. I got to know a lot of close friends through doing that, and was exposed to a lot of you know just the music world and professionalism and stuff that I'm now kind of carrying forward to this weird ambient jazz stuff that I'm doing. But yeah, but I love SG, and I'm very grateful that, I got to play her songs, which are amazing, and got to become, close friends. And yeah, she's great.
Well, speaking of weird ambient jazz, it seems like from what I understand, a lot of what would become Water Still Flows was coming together as you were touring with SG. Can you talk about, because when I hear a record like this that doesn't sound like anybody else, that takes you on such a one of the things that I would notice today was, as I was listening to it again, was that and for me it's perfectly timed because like this record coming into my life and getting to talk to you about it, because it kind of like for me sort of reflects the last like 9 months of my life. It's really heavy in parts. It's also really beautiful in parts. It's also it flows really well, but at the same time, like there's some really intense moments, heavy intense moments. Can you talk a little bit about like how something like this comes together? Like how are you taking these sounds that could be these completely disparate sounds and make them sound so beautiful?
Man, yeah, first off, thank you for the nice words. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like I don't know. All that stuff just kind of comes out of me, and I don't
Hmm.
I never really premeditate it too much. So I just kind of stay working at stuff, and the direction will slowly reveal itself to me, of how these pieces like fit together and where they go. But I usually have no idea at the onset. And it's not like I'm like, hey, I'm
Hmm.
going to start a new record and write a record. It's like I'm just always in my studio, just experimenting with stuff and working on stuff. And so oftentimes when I bring in other musicians, it starts to become clear to me like where it could go, where it is going, and where I want it to go. And so yeah, but I think just having, it's like, as much as I'm a musician or whatever you producer, whatever you want to call it, like I'm just a fan of music and
Hmm.
listening to records, and have been my whole life. And so that's like that's sort of the most important thing to me. So when I'm just thinking of it as me, the listener, what I would want to hear, and
Hmm.
sequencing things and arranging things, and I love all these types of music, whether it's like doom metal or John Coltrane or Steve Roach, or like ambient music, heavy music, post rock, anything. I love all music. And so yeah, it's just a confluence of all my influences and tastes that just kind of come together in this hodgepodge of ways that I try to combine in ways that feel new to me as a listener, and hope that that translates emotionally and in an interesting way to anybody else who listens to it, I guess.
No, it certainly does for me. And so okay, I'm curious about that process. Like if we can kind of like get more
Yeah.
granular with it, because like a lot of the folks that I talk to are, singer songwriters. And
Hmm.
for me, when I write songs as like a serious hobby, and in the way that I feel like process there, if it comes together in pieces, a lot of times what we're working on is matching up lines, right? It's like I've
Hmm.
got in this notebook, I've got an idea and there's lines here.
Sure.
And when if I'm piecing something together, and that's not usually how my brain works, it usually just comes out. But if I'm piecing something together, it's usually because it's trying to figure out how those lines fit together and working
Hmm.
on rhymes and that kind of thing. So like for you, are those ideas in your head just stuck in your head somewhere, like these sounds, or are they in voice memos? Are they sort of written out? And what does that
No,
look like?
it's it's more it's more just kind of like going to a fairly blank canvas, like just like day in and day out, and just throwing paint on it and seeing like what it looks like. Because it's, I mean, once in a while I'll have like an idea of like how I want to approach things, but usually it's just sort of a process of just like, yeah, putting stuff in the pot and seeing what it tastes like,
Mm.
and yeah, and so I mean, yeah, that whether that's, it could be something as simple as like a loop or a sequence of synths or some weird sounding samples, and then it's like you just keep adding stuff or subtracting stuff until it starts to reveal itself as a new type of a thing that inspires me, or a new sound that feels interesting to me, or a thing that's like worth chasing down, like a pretty, it could be like a 2 year long rabbit hole of like chasing this thing that winds up being like the final version of the song. But yeah, it's more of a kind of meditative process of just experimenting with sounds and playing music in solitude, until something feels kind of emotionally grasping or just interesting to me. And then like I said, I'll send it to other people, and then it becomes something else, and but then I can kind of see where it might go. But like I said, I have no clue where it's going to go. And that's kind of the fun part of it, is just trying to focus on creating something that feels unique, and following those threads as far and as weirdly as I can.
Man, that's so interesting because I don't know. Like I said, we all consume music in our own contexts, right? And so,
Hmm.
like for me, as I said earlier, this record has been important, and the timing of it is ideal. Today, I woke up with like uh, a pretty heavy bout of anxiety, and
Hmm.
uh, so the first thing I did was uh, I put your record in my earbuds and I went for a walk and I just didn't stop the walk until I finished the record. So just listen to it
Hmm.
straight through, no distractions, just me walking.
Yeah.
And as I was walking, it helped me as I'm listening to the record. That's when I realized that it fit in the context of the narrative of my last 9 months of my life. And I don't know
That's
that
so cool.
yeah, and I don't know that I thought I caught it the first few times. The first few times I was like, this is a really cool record, right? Like that, the
Hmm.
first few times I listened, that's how I process it. But today it was like, oh, this mirrors the emotions of the last 9 months of my life.
Wow. That's so cool.
Oh,
I
yeah, well,
think, I mean,
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
No, 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 go ahead,
Well,
please.
I think that I think that that's kind of the nice thing about instrumental music in general, is that,
Mm.
you can you're not being told words of of how you're experiencing it and feeling it. So it's really kind of, it's like how it's up to you how it affects you.
That's cool. Okay, so that was going to be my question then was like, you mentioned that when that you're making music that you'd want to listen to, right? Like you're
Mhm.
aware of of that. But it sounds like because, like I said, I'm projecting a narrative onto the music because of what I've been going through, and so that was a question that I sort of had. But it sounds like you're answering. Sounds like you're saying that there isn't necessarily a narrative that you're going for in this music, or is there?
Uh, I mean, narratives, it's hard. It's hard to assign a narrative to when you're not using words. And so, there's things that it means to me, and I think all of my records like means something different to me, but it's really just a reflection of like whatever my life is in the time that I'm making it and then putting it out. And so yeah, so this one, yeah, it's like yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily like a, a a deeper narrative other than that, I was in a pretty stressed era of my life and making this music in kind of small increments when I had any time or energy to do it. And yeah, so I think there's just this sense of like catharsis involved. There kind of always is in my music. I think there's
Hmm.
always something that's like I'm getting out of my system. And I don't know. And that has each record has like progressed into something kind of a bit more grandiose and like less minimal. Um, so then I don't know what that is. Maybe, yeah, maybe that'll reveal itself to me in a
Yeah, I'm
year or two when
curious
I'm
about
looking back,
that. I'm curious about that. What are your like your initial thoughts as you bring that up? Like why they become more grandiose? I guess I didn't notice that at first, and now that I think about it, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think because when I made my first record, I truly had no clue at all that I would ever like put a band together that anyone would ever hear this music. I mean, this was just like purely just being creative on my own time, and I was just gonna throw it on Bandcamp, and my maybe my friends would hear it. And yeah, so then that got like a slightly larger release than I was expecting due to my friends Jay and Ben Swank at Third Band. And yeah, and then it just felt my intent with that record was that I wanted to make instrumental music that was interesting and engaging, but not so much so that it was distracting. Like I
Hmm.
wanted it to be something that you could like have on in the kitchen while you're cooking dinner and like it not be offensive or just get so dissonant or noisy or whatever that more normal people would question what you're listening to. uh, and so yeah, and then the next record, the world around me felt just really chaotic, and I've it felt okay to take risks and I guess just be more ambitious with what I was writing and have sections of the music that were heavier, more chaotic, and just kind of intense. Uh, and to just throw more sounds at it and let more influences creep in. Lean a little more into the jazz and the freak out side of things, and then also this more soundscapey ambient kind of stuff. And then when that felt like it was received well, it was like, okay, it's like cool. I can push myself, I can take risks, I can be more bold with my decisions of how I'm writing this music, and people respond positively to it. And I wasn't necessarily expecting that because again, it felt like a risk to put this, to have like a couple minutes of just like hectic free jazz, stuff that's like feels like your head's gonna explode. And but that's how I felt I was writing it. And so then with this stuff, once I kind of found this zone with like down-tuned heavy guitars through really loud, overdriven amps and fuzz pedals and stuff, I was like, this is what sounds interesting and cool to me right now. And then I started adding saxophones and all these weird samples to it. And, you know, yeah. So then, but after the second record where it felt like those risks paid off, I was like, fuck it. I'm just gonna lean into this weird like doom metal jazz for a couple of these songs, and then mix it with all this other stuff I've been working on, and try to stitch not a narrative, but like an emotional like flow state to the whole thing, to where it feels cohesive and it feels like it's meant to be an album.
Man, that's awesome. Thank you for
Yeah,
all of that. Okay, so that begs the question then, you're going on tour this fall and you're coming here to Orlando, which I'm really
yeah,
excited about. I would love to
yeah,
get a
yeah.
chance to actually meet you in person when you're here at the
Please,
Beacham,
yeah, yeah,
October 1st. I know I've got a good buddy, Chris Belcher, who's excited about it too. We've been nerding out about your record, and
yeah.
one of the
Awesome.
questions that he and I were talking about earlier. as I told him I was going to get a chance to talk with you, is like what your touring setup looks like. There's so much on this record. There's fiddle, there's saxophone, there's like all this stuff. So like
Yeah.
what does your touring setup look like when you're trying to bring songs like this on the road?
It changes depending on the tour. But I've found that, I mean, so for like my release show in town, uh, which like provides me with a little more resources, there's a little more time to prepare. If my friends are in town that are, on the road a lot are actually here, then like, yeah, we had like a six-piece band with vibraphone and pedal steel and sax and stuff. And
So,
then, and with a lineup like that, it's like simultaneously easier and more challenging to like bring this stuff to life because but everyone in the band is so incredibly talented, and that's just like people that I work with now. And so yeah, it can be this sort of almost like orchestra level like intensity that comes about. But touring is, there's just usually not the space or the budget to do to have six people on the road. And so usually we have like a quartet of me, bass, drums, and saxophone. And I find that we get fairly close to approximating what the stuff sounds like on the records, but we don't really try. I'm not, as a band leader, I'm not concerned with recreating anything verbatim. And I
mm,
want to take this sort of kind of jam band or like jazz approach where it's like, we're going to start here and however we get to here, like, who knows? And I want people to express themselves and I want people to feel really comfortable doing what they're good at, and provide a space for people to, yeah, just play their instruments. It's like everyone I work with is so, it's like humblingly talented.
mm.
And but most of them have gigs where they are, playing very by the book, like specific stuff, which is great. I've done that a ton. I'm about to do it for the next 2 weeks. And but it's like if you're a true weirdo and getting to play improvised music that's like, especially that's like a weird mix of, post rock and doom metal and jazz and stuff. It's like it's just like a playground for good musicians, and I encourage that. And so it's been cool because now like uh tapers have been coming out to the shows and are like recording the shows, and they truly are very different every night. And it it always, yeah, we find new corners of the music. But the Orlando show for that, it's just going to be a duo. It's just going to be Sammy, the sax player, and I, because the band we're opening for, Slaughter Beach Dog, requested a smaller, just not like a full band opener because it can just be kind of chaotic. So yeah, it'll be a whole new interpretation of what we're doing, and I'm not even totally sure myself what that'll be, but I'm excited to find it.
So do you bring like 14 guitar pedals with you? Like what is how if it's just you and a duo,
Yeah,
like how are you making
yeah.
those
No,
sounds?
I'll have a embarrassingly large pedal board. No, I'll have a couple synthesizers, a lot of guitar pedals, and like some sort of sampler sequencer thing that I can sort of write parts on that can be a little more engaging and active. That's like not as uh I just like I don't want to use tracks. I don't want to have a laptop on stage. That's just kind of against how I view
Oh,
things.
interesting. Interesting.
Um, but it kind of, the sampling thing can kind of feel like backing tracks, but it's like it's just a bunch of loops that we're manipulating and working with in real time. And there's still, I try to, as best as I can, keep the element of improvisation and an organic through line. It's mostly just repetitive things that the sampler's doing. So yeah, and then having the saxophone also to be the thing that can like really help try to find more transcendent territory, I guess.
Yeah, man. Um, I skipped over a question that I meant to ask you
Yeah.
earlier, thinking about your career. It's interesting as you dive in to do this research, like how many just incredible, and you alluded to it earlier, like how many incredible people you've worked with and continue to work with. It's just amazing musicians. Can you talk about your time touring with Circles Around the Sun and specifically the late great Neil Casal?
So when I toured with them in 2020 uh 2023. So
Okay.
it was I never got to meet Neil.
Oh, bummer.
Um yeah, but those guys are incredible, and they're all kind of legendary in their own right
Hmm.
as players and sidemen and stuff. And so yeah, and also I mean I'm grateful for anybody who invites me to come on tour. And at that time I hadn't really played, I hadn't really toured in the States at all. And so yeah, I was really humbled to be asked by them. And then as I got to know them, I didn't know that much about them. So it was really cool to learn to know Dan Horn and Adam McDougall and John Shannon and stuff, and know that, you know, it's like Adam played in the Black Crowes, and Dan like produced a bunch of the Cass McCombs records and stuff. Like, you know, some things that were kind of in my horizon that I wasn't fully aware of. And then yeah, just getting to watch. I mean, those guys are just they're lifers, and they're good people, and they're incredible musicians. So yeah, it was a really fun tour. And that's how I got to know Michaela Davis, who has now become like one of my absolute like favorite people to collaborate with and work with. So yeah, it's like, and you just never know where these like roads wind up and who you get to know in the process. And so yeah, I'm very grateful.
That's cool. Well, clearly you're doing something right if people keep asking you to, to play with them and go on tour with them. There's got to be not only your talent, but just sort of, how you operate.
Let's
I
just say I've done it. I've done it enough to know how to not piss anybody off. So that, you know,
That's the
if you want
secret.
to, if anybody wants to bring me on tour, I will happily be a chill, agreeable presence, and I'll show you where there's good food.
Isn't that just like 80% of life? I feel like,
Yeah,
like I
it
know.
is. They don't. Nobody tells you that when you're young and annoying.
No, just don't piss people off, and then people ask you to
Yeah,
do stuff. It took me forever to learn that lesson,
it's
man.
crazy. It's
Um,
crazy.
Gosh, I mean, I'm a middle school teacher by day, and I think about the times that I was just like kind of hard to work with because I saw things that were wrong and I wanted to fix them, and
Yeah.
then I would be stubborn about it. And now I'm just like, whatever, man. Listen, I like that salary. I'm gonna do my best every day, but I'm gonna let go of the things that I like that
Yeah.
healthcare. I'm gonna let go of the things that I can't control. Like you're not gonna hear much from
Exactly.
me these days. Um, so this has been such a delight, and we usually kind of start to wrap things up with the art that has you inspired at the moment. It could be like music that you're listening to, it could be a show you're watching, a book you're reading, like TV show.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what's got you fired up right now?
It's got me fired up. Let's see. Let me think about that. I've been really, I mean, for the past like, I don't know, 6 or 7 months now, I've been really into this band Lankum. I don't know if you know them. They're Irish.
Mm-mm.
And they kind of, yeah, they fuse this like traditional Celtic and sort of UK folk with a lot of modern, interesting ideas and sounds and soundscapes. And it's dark and heavy. It's yeah, it's really beautiful. But they put out a record last year called False Lankum. That's yeah, one of my favorite things that's come out. Another thing that I've been kind of obsessed with lately is I've been going back and watching a lot of old YouTube videos of Adrian Belew,
Mm.
uh, guitar player, sideman, frontman. Yeah, just you know, he played in King Crimson in the '80s. He was in Talking Heads. He played with David Bowie.
Mm.
He played with Frank Zappa. And just I don't know, going back and kind of evaluating his career from back then and seeing how he was this really singular, eccentric, amazing guitar player, but was very much himself, and how he, you know, people hired him for that. and he just added this spice to so many records and to so many live shows, and just kind of going back and watching all these all these live videos of him
Yeah.
has really been humbling, and has kind of been blowing my mind that this one guy got to play with all these incredible bands. What else? I don't know.
So I have a
Yeah.
question about that. So if when you're watching something, you said it was humbling. Like, are you able to pick up and learn from those moments? Like, are you seeing something that you're like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that, or I wouldn't have gone
I
that
mean,
direction?
yeah, I mean, just watching his approach to guitar is fascinating. I mean, I think he's one of the most underrated and like exciting guitar players who's ever done anything, and is not talked about enough. Uh,
Hmm.
but I think the humbling side of it is like, it's like, yeah, it's like this guy's been kind of a hero of mine for a lot of my life now, but it's just like, it's like just a reminder of going back and seeing him playing with King Crimson and like the some of the live Talking Head stuff, and it's like this guy was just a absolute monster doing stuff on guitar that still nobody's doing, and it
Hmm.
just is really exciting to me, and it's just a good reminder of how fertile that era of music is, from like the late '70s to the early '80s, and
Well,
how much a part of it he was.
I was talking about yesterday. I was talking to a friend who's considering learning guitar, and he's in his 20s, I guess, and he's thinking about learning guitar. And one of the things that I was telling him about my own journey with the guitar, and I'm a very rudimentary guitar player,
Mhm.
but the thing that I love about it is that, and this is true of music in general, but like you're never gonna master it, right? There are some people that we
No,
think of as masters that are incredible, that will blow your mind, but there's always something new, there's always something different, there's always a way to push
always.
yourself and grow. And that is one of my favorite things about playing music and writing, is that you're not, if you think you've got it mastered, then
Then
you're
get back in
delusional.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's yeah. And then and then on top of that, the challenge to try to create something that like feels new and like you. And yeah, and it's like, I mean, it's a lifelong pursuit. And and it's like, a lot of people from 40, 50 years ago are still out there restlessly searching for it, which is amazing. And I hope
Yeah.
that's me in, 40 years.
Hell yeah. I'm sure it will be, man. Dude, this has been such a pleasure. Your record is amazing. I cannot wait for the show here in Orlando.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, yeah. Drop me a line before you come out, and
Uh,
yeah.
awesome. I will. Yeah. I'd love to get a chance to meet you. Rich Ruth, y'all. Thank you so much, Rich. Thank all of you for listening. The song you're hearing in this episode is Aspiring to the Sky off Water Still Flows. I'm so excited. He'll be on tour and coming here to my home base in Orlando, Florida this fall. Can't wait for that show. MarinadePodcast.com for all things the Marinade. Follow us everywhere. Subscribe. Give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app. Tell a friend about the show. These are all free ways to support the Marinade. Go do that right now while you're listening, please. It makes a big difference for us and costs so little of your time and energy. Also, very exciting news. Go follow Life's Greatest Hits on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. That way you can get updates about my new podcast with my dear friend Jordan Foley. We went to see The Head and the Heart last night with Phosphorescent opening. Jordan and I did, and it's funny because like we're so stoked about this podcast that we just kept talking about the show. Right, like we had to stop ourselves because we wanted to enjoy the performance, which was incredible, by the way. Phosphorescent and Head in the Heart. If that tour's coming your way, make sure you check it out. Our first episode of Life's Greatest Hits, y'all, is available wherever you consume podcasts. Make sure to subscribe on your podcast app so you don't miss a thing. We're on just about everything now. I think we're still working on trying to get us on YouTube, and going forward that should be the case. And then a couple of the lesser known platforms or lesser used ones. A lot of folks don't use Pandora, for example. We'll get that eventually, but Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the major ones, we're pretty readily available now. We're working hard to expand this Marinade Media thing and bring you more stories. So thank you, thank you, thank you for listening, everybody. If you really like what we're doing, please consider joining our Patreon community. Just $2 a month, y'all. You can gain access to Patreon exclusive content like our show Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that shape my creative life, and provide a window into the process of making the marinade. One of the best days of the month for me is recording What We're Getting Down On. That's my show with my dear friend, the brilliant and hilarious Peter Haraldson. That's about the art that has us fired up at the moment. You can try a free trial of Patreon to see if you like it. No pressure. Try it for 7 days. Set a reminder on your phone in case you want to cancel. Keep going if you dig it. If you want to support the show financially, but you don't want to commit to a monthly subscription, y'all, I totally get that. You can Venmo or PayPal us at the Marinade, and all the money goes right back into the making of the show. We covered Bonnaroo this summer and Laurel Cove Festival because of the generosity of our Patreon patrons. We got Orange Blossom Review coming up. We've got Swanee Roots Revival coming up. There's a lot of other ideas that I have that I'd like to implement, and really I can't do a lot of it without the generosity of our Patreon patrons. But above all, I'm just so thankful that you listen and spread the word about the Marinade. It's a free show for a reason. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.